Does the document that I'm about to show you finally provide the evidence that suggests Darren Nichols, the alleged getaway driver on the night that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were killed, was actually a police informant prior to their murders? Now, before we start this particular video, I just want to give you a little bit of context. I'm currently in possession of some 277 pages of the official case file pertaining to Michael Steele and Jack Wombs, the two men who were ultimately convicted of these murders. Now, these documents are available from the National Archives in London, and they only became available to the public in July of this year. Take a look at the following. So the following page here is discussing Operation Sentry. Operation Sentry was an undercover operation which took place after the deaths of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe and focused in on Sarah Saunders and Michael Steele. So take a listen to the following. The operation also included watching Tate's estranged girlfriend Sarah. There was no brief to threaten Steele's life. Essex police had started looking at Nichols soon after the murders and were aware of one trip he made to Ostend. In March 1996, it was learned that DCA, also known as DC Bird, had obtained information about dumped drugs. A covert operation was set up to inquire into the activities of DCA, headed up by DS Bright, and his phone was tapped. A payment to the informer was authorised. It was normal practice to use a contact sheet to record any names provided by an informer. DCA was committed for trial. Nichols was anxious to find out who he was, and on learning it was DCA, said he thought it had been set up by DCA. Nichols had made a special request to speak to Barrington and inquired about protection. Nichols said he had been used for the previous 6 months. Okay, so according to that particular page there, that particular document, Darren Nichols, in his own words, has been a police informant since at least November. Since at least November 1995. Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were killed on the 6th of December. So let's think back as to what transpired in November of 1995. You had Leah Betts, who sadly died of the ecstasy tablet. She dies on November 16th. You've got the dud cannabis importation, which goes completely tits up. Nichols goes over to Holland, sources this gear, which turns out to be dud, still brings it back on the boat, and upon reaching UK shorelines, the police were already waiting. Think about that for a second. Nichols is involved, he's getting the stuff together. Steele goes over to pick it up, brings it back to the UK, and the Coast Guard was already waiting. Nichols, at this stage, is already a police informant. Steele, by all accounts, thought, how the hell did the police know we were going to be here? Who's tipped off the police? Is it Pat Tate? Is Pat Tate a grass? When all along, it's Darren Nichols. Darren Nichols is the bad egg, isn't he? He's well in with Michael Steele and Jack Wombs. He's hiding in plain sight. We also had Pat Tate's flat. That was raided in November. That was then occupied by Tucker's girlfriend, Donna Garwood. That place was raided for drugs. All of this transpires when Darren Nichols is a police informant. Think about that for a second. Now, also think about what we know factually from Darren Nichols himself in terms of Darren Nichols' time spent as a police informant. We've got this DCA, this DC Bird character, the corrupt Essex detective. He's willing to go above and beyond in terms of criminality. Darren Nichols states that, DC Bird was willing to steal £150,000 out of Michael Steele's Jag. There's talk about DC Bird looking for this garage where this second-hand car place is selling amphetamine sulfate. He wants to find out where the garage is located and rob the dealers. And then on the day that Darren Nichols is actually arrested, Michael Steele rings up and says, Darren, I've lost some drugs. Nichols' immediate thought is, oh my God, Bird's gone over there. Bird's gone over there because I've told him where he stores his stuff. He's gone over there and stolen Michael Steele's goods. This is the level we're talking about here. A corrupt detective who was quite willing and quite able to steal, rob, whatever you want to call it, from other active criminals. This wasn't some low-level bent cop. Now, let's move on to the day of the murders. Because again, this is very important. Based on what we already know, that Darren Nichols is most likely a police informant when the murders take place. That's really key to remember. Now, who is it that initiates the contact, that gets the ball rolling on the day that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were murdered? That is Darren Nichols. Now in court, Nichols said, oh, well, I was at work and then, Michael Steele rang me and he said, I want to see you later. But that's not reflected in the call logs, is it? It's not reflected in the call logs whatsoever. The first contact between Nichols, Wombs and Steele on the day of the murders originates from Darren Nichols. Take a look at this. 12:51, the 6th of December. Darren Nichols' mobile to Michael Steele's landline. A minute later, 12:52, Darren Nichols' mobile to Michael Steele's mobile. A minute later, 12:53, Nichols' mobile to Michael Steele's mobile. Again, a minute later, 12:54, Nichols' mobile to Nichols' landline. The same minute, 12:54, Nichols' mobile again to Michael Steele's mobile. So it appears on the face of it, doesn't it, that Darren Nichols is frantic. He's making 1, 2, 3, 4 calls to Michael Steele in the space of 3 minutes. This guy, as I say, on the face of it, appears to be frantic, very, very keen to get hold of Michael Steele just after midday. Now in court, Darren Nichols said, well, I was just returning Michael Steele's call. But that's a complete lie. Because the very, very first contact between Nichols, Wombs and Steele on the day of the murders, between any of those individuals, is Darren Nichols to Michael Steele. There's not even a phone call between Wombs and Steele before this point. Darren Nichols is the first person out of these 3 individuals to establish contact. And remember, at this stage, in Darren Nichols' own words, he's already a police informant. And it looks like, doesn't it, on the face of it there, that Darren Nichols is pulling the strings. He's doing the arranging. And in court he said, oh, I was just returning Michael Steele's call. Well, there's no call there. There's no call whatsoever from Michael Steele to Darren Nichols. So that is most definitely a lie. Now, when you think about the next stage in terms of what happened the evening that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were murdered, you had these telephone calls, Darren Nichols claiming, Michael Steele wanted to meet me. Michael Steele suggested Mark's Tate. Now, having done a little bit more research on this DC bird, it would appear that at the time that he was suspended, he was living in a place called Earl's Colne. Now, Earl's Colne is less than 10 miles from Mark's Tate. What do we make of that? We've got a fair amount of evidence here to suggest that before the murders took place, Darren Nichols was indeed a police informant. We know that Darren Nichols was involved with DC Bird. We've got DC Bird living less than 10 miles from Mark's Tate. We've got Darren Nichols claiming, I was at work that day, Michael Steele was ringing me incessantly, and I was just simply returning Michael Steele's call. Well, that's not backed up by the phone logs. It's Darren Nichols who's initiating the contact on the day that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were murdered. And we've then got the meeting point that supposedly Steele suggests as Mark's Tate. Mark's Tate being less than 10 miles from the home address of DC Bird. Now, in terms of the broader picture concerning the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, does this actually change anything? Is this just a mere coincidence? The fact we've got Darren Nichols most likely being a police informer prior to the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, or does it extend further? I guess one of the things that always stands out to me is this idea of a third party, a hidden third party. Again, remember what Darren Nichols stated in his earliest police interviews. He claims he was told by 2 separate sources, by both Jack Wombs and Michael Steele, that they were going down to Rettendon and there were going to be other people already there. Mick said to me, Jack's going to show you where the lane is. Don't worry. We're going to come over to where you are and there'll be some other blokes waiting. Jack said to him, just as he got out of the car, how long are you going to be, Jack? I won't be long. I'll be about 5 minutes. Once the Range Rover gets here, we'll only be a couple of minutes because there's already some other blokes here. Or something to that degree? And is this third party facilitated in some way, shape or form by this relationship between DC Bird and Darren Nichols? What I'm going to leave you with are some of Darren Nichols' own words. Take a listen to the following.
The police had no leads, but 6 months later, the killer's getaway driver, Darren Nichols, decided to turn supergrass. Nichols is now in hiding with a new name under police protection.
On the night of the murder, I presumed I was just a driver for a drug deal. I was driving Jack to the lane where Mick would turn up with the others in a Range Rover. And when they completed their deal, I picked a pair of them up. When I was phoned up to come back and pick them up, I just drove into the lane, turned the car around and faced it back towards the road. Jack got in the car and sat in the back. And then all of a sudden, the door opened, Mick got in. The interior light came on, and I was talking to Jack. And at that moment, I noticed Jack had white gloves on, covered with blood. And Mick said, "Come on, get going." I started to pull away, and Mick started passing like the barrels of the gun over to Jack. And I was thinking, fucking hell, what's going on here? Mick said, "They won't fuck with us again." And I realised that something had happened. Obviously, I think I knew that someone had been killed. I don't really remember a lot about the journey. The journey, as far as I'm concerned, passed in 2 seconds, you know? It was probably half an hour, but it passed in 2 seconds. Don't really recall a lot of it. I just couldn't comprehend what had been done. Apparently their faces were just hanging off their heads. Just tried to forget it. Just went into the pub, drank a severe amount of drink, went home, went to bed, got up, went to work, and I suppose I was trying to forget about it, but there was no way.
Darren Nichols spent a year on remand while waiting to give evidence at the trial. It was his testimony at the Old Bailey that clinched the case against his friends Mick Steele and Jack Worms.
At the trial, I tried not to look at Worms and Steele. They scared me. You know, because what I'm doing to them. And I know how much they hate me. And I don't think I'll ever be rid of them. Mick Steele, because he's quite old, and hopefully he'll die in prison. And Jack, hopefully, when he gets out, he'll be older and wiser and just gets on with his life, rather than trying to avenge me. Probably his family I'm more worried about than him. If they go to another appeal and their appeal gets squashed, I'm particularly worried about the Worms family. No one likes the truth, especially the families of the people that did it. So it's something they've got to come to terms with, not me.
In 1992, Darren Nichols was sentenced to 3 years in prison for dealing in counterfeit money. Whilst at Hoasley Bay Prison in Suffolk, he met Mick Steele, who was coming to the end of a 9-year stretch for smuggling cannabis.
When I got out of prison, I didn't expect to hear from anyone again. And when I did hear, it was Mick Steele. Someone he wanted to smuggle with him was locked up. And I think he needed someone else, and he asked me. The bloke was absolutely brilliant. I mean, everything he did. I mean, like an engineer. He was a brilliant engineer. I mean, I couldn't understand really why he broke the law. And when I first agreed to smuggle, I didn't give it a second thought whatsoever. I just did it, because he asked me to.
Also at Hoasley Bay Prison with Darren Nichols and Mick Steele was Jack Worms. He was serving 16 months for car fraud.
I mean, I know all along, Jack, if he was up for anything, Jack would have been his second man, because him and Jack were like dead pally. Jack loved Mick. Jack would do anything for Mick. Jack really admired him, you know, looked up to him. Me and Mick Steele started smuggling cannabis across the channel. We get the ferry, we go across overnight, we get there in the morning, we buy the drugs, we do the deal. I'd go off and rent a car, bring the car back, drugs were put in the boot. I'd drive us all the way back to Blankenberg in Belgium. We wait for sort of dusk, just like early evening, 5 or 6 o'clock time, and we get the drugs down on the beach. We contact Mick, who's come over in a boat. The drugs go in the boat, the drugs go off to England. When Mick got back to England, Jack Worms would be waiting for him. He would take the drugs off him and go and hide the drugs. Mick would go back to sea, re-land somewhere else, been fishing, prove otherwise. Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were more Tucker and Tate. Rolfe was just sort of, I suppose, the equivalent of me with Steele. He was just their boy. Everyone knew them as violent, and when they were selling drugs, they were too loud, too high profile, and they didn't care. If anyone like made any comments, they used to just beat them up. And that concerned, like Mick Steele, who I worked for, because they were attracting too much of attention. And it was only a matter of time before they, like, attracted the attention onto us and, like, and got us nicked. When we went smuggling for the third time, everything went wrong from the start.
Michael Steele had brought over a consignment of cannabis in a boat from Holland, landing on the Essex coast. But the cannabis was said to have been of a very bad quality, and there were soon complaints from customers and dealers who demanded their money back. Patrick Tate, in particular, was seething with anger about the problems with the cannabis.
Pat Tate had borrowed 40,000 off some gangsters and promised them 50,000 back. Once Pat didn't get any profit because the drugs were bad, he needed something to tell the gangsters. He devised a little story where he said, "We haven't got any money back. Mick Steele, the bastard, hasn't paid us," he said. And furthermore, he said, "If he doesn't pay us, I'll kneel him down and shoot him in front of you." But Tate, with a big mouth, told too many people, and it got back to Mick. I knew that's when Mick decided to set him up and kill him. I decided that I wouldn't smuggle anymore after the murders, and I told Mick Steele I no longer wanted to smuggle, but I was quite happy to purchase drugs just for my friends and that, you know, and never had nothing to do with smuggling, because I don't know if it was my own personal fears, and they realised I'm a weakling, but they got more friendly towards me, wanting to do things with me, like wanting to go flying. Like Mick offered to take me flying and was egging me on to come flying. And he was betting me that I couldn't identify my town from where I lived, from an aeroplane and things like that. And I said, of course I could. And then when he turned up for me to go flying, he had Jack with him. And he says, right, Jack can sit in the back. And I thought, there's no fucking way I'm going up in an aeroplane with those two. If I hadn't grasped, without a doubt, I would be dead. If I had kept my mouth shut, gone into the prison system, I would have died in prison. It's not that I think I would have died. I would have died. I would not be here now. I would be dead. They would have found some 18-year-old who wanted to earn half ounce of dope, who would have stabbed me in the showers, mate. I've been in prison. I've been on remand. You upset someone, you may only end up with 50 stitches. You may end up a bit worse off than that. They're always at it, and the worst ones of all is someone who thinks you're a grass. They'll catch you. They all have a go. They all want to stick the knife in together. I've heard that I'm living in Spain in a villa, and I'm being looked after by the police. I've heard other ones. I'm now in South Africa, and I've got a bit of a suntan. And they think, I'm definitely abroad. No one knows actually, do they? I mean, all they would do is speculate. The reality, it's nothing like that at all. They never give you a villa abroad or help you move. I mean, plus the fact is that most countries won't take you in because you are a criminal. Everything's a constant lie. You know it is. It's like I haven't got a job, And I've been offered a few silly jobs, but I can't take them. I mean, you get the basic dole money, in my case, which is about £48 a week, and they find you somewhere to live, which they rent, and then you're expected to get on with your life. You can meet someone, how can you tell them, oh yeah, by the way, I'm a supergrass? I mean, most people are supposed to hate people like me. How can I tell if they like me or hate me? There's a bounty on my head. I'm not sure how much it is. Someone says it's $250,000, someone says it's $500,000. But who's going to collect it? I mean, if someone topped me, where are they going to go to collect it? I wouldn't want to be the bloke knocking on someone's door. They say, oh yeah, it's up here by the railway lines. Come with me. I'm worried inside. It hurts me. I'm worried. I just can't say how I feel, I suppose. I mean, I even thought to myself, wouldn't it have been easier if I just topped myself and then nothing would have happened? Everyone would have carried on and I'd have been forgotten about in a fortnight. That would have cheered up too many people and I thought, fuck them. I feel sorry for my wife more than anything. If I get to go down, well then she gets to be lonely. I mean, she's had a lot of doubts in me herself, and it's took a lot of effort for me to convince her that it's rubbish, and I told the truth. I mean, it's pretty hard for me because even my wife doubts me. Fucking brilliant, yes, fucking brilliant moment, wasn't it? A big sigh of relief, and I just thought, excellent, there's no more. They've got no more hold over me, and that moment was great.
Darren Nichols was given a 15-month sentence, but because he had served time on remand, he was allowed to go free.
The funny thing is, this great moment happened in my life, and when I got home, I couldn't tell anyone. Couldn't even go and have a drink and be happy, sort of just You know. No one knew it, apart from me. I just sort of had to wander around normally. I mean, Mick and Jack getting off can play on your mind. It plays on my mind. Because if they got off on an appeal, in the long term, I think they would have to find me. Because they wouldn't be happy until they kill me. Even if you don't think you're thinking about it, you know you are. I don't know how the appeal will go. I mean, assuming the fact that they're guilty. Obviously, I'd hope severely that it went the way I want it to go, and they don't get off. If I'm a big liar, I concocted the perfect story. I knew where 2 of my friends were on the night of the murder, and I think everyone should just look at the fact that 12 people consider me to be telling the truth, and they heard all of the evidence, and other people haven't heard all of the evidence. Not even I have heard all of the evidence. So it bugs me to think that people think I'm a big liar. I don't need an imagination to guess what people think of me. You get the criminal side who think you're the biggest thing since sliced bread in the grass department, and on the other side of things, the police, you know you're the biggest witness they've ever had. I don't get drunk and think, oh right, what a good pub story. Look, I grassed all my mates up. I don't think that's something you can be proud of or boast about. I've made myself more famous than the bloke who grassed the craze up. I can live without that fame.